Now adjourn. Lloyd Russell Moyle.
Mr Deputy Speaker, on the 1st of December 1988, we observed the first World AIDS Day. It was created as an international day to raise awareness of the AIDS pandemic caused by the spread of HIV and to mourn those that had died from the disease. In 2 days' time, we mark its 30th anniversary. And this event gives us pause to reflect how far we've come and to remember those who we've lost. But such events are also deeply personal to me. Because, Mr Deputy Speaker, next year I will be marking an anniversary of my own. 10 years since I became HIV positive. It has been a long journey from the fear of acceptance and today, hopefully, advocacy, knowing that my treatment keeps me healthy and protects any partner that I may have. When you are first diagnosed, you get that call from the clinic and they just say, you need to come in. They don't tell you the details. And you know immediately something is going to be wrong. So all the different worst-case scenarios flash through your mind. And of course, being someone who was a sexually active young man, HIV is one of those things that flashes through there. And so you kind of know, going in there, something is wrong, and it might well be serious. But at the same time, you are working out all the ways that this is just some joke. This is some technical error. This is some, kind of tiny thing that they're going to tell you that you'll be laughing about later on. You try and imagine the ways that you're going to get out of this. And then in that NHS room, with those cream carpets and the plastic seating that we all know, they tell you. And it hits you like a wall. And though you've prepared yourself for it, in your mind, nothing quite prepares you for when they say those words. And I remember looking up at that ceiling, those false ceilings that you get, and wishing that one of those tiles would just whip away and it would suck you up and you'd wake up and it would all be a dream. And it would all be over. But of course, the reality is, Mr Deputy Speaker, that is not what happens. Instead, you walk out of that room, and even with all the greatest support and advice that they offer you, you walk out feeling totally numb. And you have a million things running through your mind, but at the same time, a sense of absolute nothingness. And I've decided to make this announcement and speech today, Mr Speaker, Deputy Speaker, because earlier this year I was at an awards ceremony in Brighton. I'd nominated Gary Pergetter, who has been running a local club for people living with HIV for a number of years called Lunch Positive. He'd won the award and people were coming up and talking about how important the project was, how brave he had been, talking about his HIV status. And I felt like I'm watching someone who has done inspiring work, and I'm proud to have nominated him, but I haven't told anyone else in this room that I'm HIV positive too. And just like so many that attend Lunch Positive, I'm lucky because the medication means that I won't get sick and I can't transmit HIV. And I felt that if Gary and so many others could talk openly about it, then so should I. The second reason that I wanted to have this debate today is because we are genuinely on the cusp of eradicating new HIV transmissions in this country. Figures today show we are already, in parts of this country, halting the rates of HIV diagnosis. But we are at a fork in a road, and currently I worry that we might be starting to head in the wrong direction, with 700 million of cuts to public health between 2014 and 2017. We're not investing in the universal PrEP rollout, the pill that prevents HIV, and so I think it is important for me politically to speak out. And finally, I wanted to be able to stand here in this place and say to those that are living with HIV that their status does not define them, that we can be whoever we want to be. And to those who have not been tested, maybe out of fear, I say to you, it is better to live in knowledge than to die in fear. Mr Deputy Speaker, HIV in this country is no longer the death sentence it once was. A recent study led by the University of Bristol found that due to the advances in HIV treatment, people living with HIV can expect to live a near normal life. The improvements in survival for people with HIV is one of the greatest success stories of recent times. What was once considered a terminal disease is now seen as a manageable condition. Yet the information has not changed the narrative, which is still sadly framed in those scare campaigns of the tombs of the 1980s. Yet so much of LGBT culture also is marked by this spectre of HIV, something that has led to an incredible sense of fear about the disease. And in that hospital room, and in the days and weeks that followed, I had to come to terms with that fear myself. I'm a HIV positive man, but because I've been taking the right medication for several years, I am what the NHS calls HIV positive undetectable. That means not only can you not detect HIV in my system, so I don't get sick, it means that I can't transmit HIV to someone else. So as the virus lays undetectable and dormant in my body, my medication ensures that the virus doesn't reactivate, doesn't progress, and can't be passed on. That's why, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the NHS says undetectable equals untransmittable. UNAIDS highlights 3 large studies conducted between 2007 and 2016 of HIV transmissions among thousands of couples, with one partner being positive and the other negative. In those studies, there was not a single case of sexual transmission of HIV from a positive undetectable person to a HIV negative partner. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is safer to have sex with someone who is HIV positive undetectable than to have sex with someone that doesn't know their status. Yeah. Because undetectable equals untransmittable. Understanding that I was unable to transmit HIV sexually has been life-changing too. I went from thinking that I would never have a HIV-negative partner, or that if I had sex with someone, I could pass it on, to the knowledge that I can live a normal life and that any partner I have is totally protected. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I can't transmit HIV to my sexual partner. I have a perfectly healthy life. So my announcement here today should go totally unnoticed.
On that point. I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and may I say he's being immensely courageous in what he's doing today. And I, for one, am sure that his courage, his bravery, will no doubt reduce the stigma and reduce the fear of so many living within our country and far further beyond.
Thank you. Yes, but I expect, you're right, that my name will help those people, and it might appear in tomorrow's newspapers as a result, of course, of being the first MP to declare themselves HIV positive in this chamber, and the second, only after Chris Smith, to openly live with HIV as an MP.
Will the honourable gentleman give way?
I will do.
Very briefly, I just want to say what a typical gesture of my honourable friend and how proud of you that we all are.
So, to gauge what the public reaction might be like, maybe foolishly, I went on social media to read some of the comments on recent HIV news stories. You don't have to scroll down to find comments like anyone with HIV and has sex should be tried for murder, or fags getting what they deserve, or disgusting lifestyle choice. Now, most of the people behind these comments will be homophobes who are just weaponising HIV to attack LGBT people. And if it wasn't HIV, they would find something else, because they are haters and they are not pleasant people. But HIV stigma is not just a symptom of homophobes. Even the most well-meaning people can perpetuate HIV stigma, and it takes many shapes. It can be believing that HIV and AIDS is always associated with a death sentence. It can be thinking that HIV is only transmitted through sex. It is thinking that HIV infections are the result of some personal or moral fault. And it can be believing inaccurate information about how HIV is transmitted, which in turn creates irrational behaviour and misconceptions about personal risk. Mr. Deputy Speaker, before I was diagnosed, I myself perpetuated some of those stigmas. So it's not without judgment that I ask people to reflect. It is with a genuine ask that we begin to think, talk and act differently when it comes to HIV. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is even harder when there is a taboo about talking about sex, which means stigma is often compounded, creating a more risky environment because those people don't seek the treatment they need. The Sussex Beacon in my constituency is one of only 2 residential care facilities for people living with HIV in the country. It originally started as a hospice in the 1990s. 3 to 4 people died there each week. Fortunately, end-of-life care is a rare occurrence now at the Beacon, but today most of their support services are utilised by marginalised groups with HIV who face a big stigma. Older people diagnosed late, women, black and ethnic minorities. All of these groups are disproportionately affected by stigma and rely on the good work of the Sussex Beacon and charities like it, but their funding is being reduced. Yesterday, I was lucky enough to get a photo at the Martin Fisher Foundation and their Stiggy with the Stigmasaurus as part of their campaign to make HIV stigma history. And I hope other members who weren't able to will be able to join me in that pledge coming forward. Because stigma causes a treatable disease to become life-threatening, again due to the impact of an individual's mental health and their access to medication. No person diagnosed with HIV today should feel any less able to thrive and enjoy life than anyone else because of their status. But stigma is not just a UK problem, it is a global one. 15 years ago, 200,000 people around the world received treatment for HIV. Today, it is 22 million, but we still have 15 million more needing access to regular medicine.
Would you all get away?
I will do, go on.
Can I first of all thank the Honourable Gentleman for bringing his personal story to the House today, and we mean that very much. And also, can I say, Mr Deputy Speaker, I wish him continued good health and that he continues to prosper as he quite clearly does. I mentioned him beforehand I wanted to do an intervention, and I just want to bring to his attention in my constituency of Strangford, at one of my churches, the Enum Church. They have a specific HIV programme in Swaziland where it has the highest levels of HIV in most of Africa. And every year children come over, Mr Deputy Speaker, of a choir group. Every one of them are HIV positive, but every one of those children are surviving today because of the medication that's available. And I just want to say that if the medication's there, Mr Deputy Speaker, and Honourable Gentleman, really, we can do lots of things and save lives and give opportunity. And there's a lot of goodwill across the world amongst many churches and amongst many individuals to help as well.
Quite right. And we are making progress on treatment. But when it comes to stigma, we still have so much further to do. Last week, I was in Kenya with the International Development Committee, and I met a HIV-positive mother of 8 children who was from the Democratic Republic of Congo. And although on medication, she had suffered such abuse that she was forced to flee the DRC and now lives in a refugee camp. Because of the prejudice and violence she faced, as a result of her status, she was forced to leave without her children, and she knows not of their future. Deputy Speaker, I do not have time to talk about the international context.
Thank my friend for giving way. I think he's making an absolutely brilliant and historic speech, and I'm very grateful that he mentioned my good friend Chris Smith, who very bravely told the world in 1984 that he was gay and proud of it, and we're proud of Chris for doing that. I'm also very pleased that he's brought up the international context of this, the international context where there is appalling levels of prejudice and abuse against HIV-positive people and against the LGBT community in many countries around the world. We just need to send a message out from this House of Commons. This country has changed its attitudes. We have done a great deal medically to help people. We need to ensure that the rest of the world understands that we can do the same in every other country in the world. We have to close our minds to prejudice and open our minds up to human rights and justice for people all across the globe.
Yeah. Thank you. I totally agree. And there are some countries in the world that I now, because of this announcement, may struggle to be able to travel to. So this is important that we continue to make international efforts. I don't have time to talk about all the international aspects here. I will, of course, commend the work of the HIV/AIDS Alliance and plan to come back to this House in future months to talk about their End AIDS 2030 festival, which is really important. Turning back to the UK, it is not just the case that HIV is treatable, it is now preventable with 1 tablet a day. You can prevent yourself from contracting HIV with what is pre-exposure prophylactics, also known as PrEP. PrEP is revolutionising the fight against HIV transmissions. It has an almost 100% success rate, a higher rate than condoms in the prevention of HIV, and it's just 1 pill. We expect this pill to soon be available as a generic drug, and according to the NHS's own analysis, it could save the health service £1 billion in preventing HIV transmissions for future generations. Astoundingly, however, the only way to access PrEP in England is through a limited trial. This is not a medical trial. Those have been done and approved. This is not about financing. We know the cost. This trial, as far as I can see, is about delaying the rollout of PrEP in England because someone meddling in the ministry thinks they know better than doctors when it comes to your health. It seems to me that this trial is more concerned about what you do between the sheets than the health of the nation. And despite just being 1 year into this 3-year trial, 3,000 additional places have already had to be added, and it looks like the 13,000 places will run out early next year. England now lags behind all the other nations in the UK as the only country with capped PrEP access on the NHS. And there are 2 years to go until this trial ends, yet people are unable to get immediate access to PrEP, with many clinics now having long waiting lists and some completely full. We know that there are cases of young men who have sought out this prevention pill and have been turned away because the clinics can't accommodate them, and they have subsequently become HIV positive. Those men now have to live with HIV and everything associated with it because of this, frankly, misguided morality of this decision. Make no mistakes, these are not isolated cases. The longer this government waits to roll out PrEP properly, the more people will be diagnosed. So can I ask the Minister, will he intervene to ensure PrEP is made routinely available on the NHS in England, just like his government have already done with Northern Ireland with direct rule, just like Scottish government has done, and just like a Labour government has done in Wales? Failing that, will he at least uncap the trial to ensure those trying to access the drug can? Will the Minister reverse public health cuts, including in sexual health, so they meet demand, including people affected by HIV? Otherwise, we actually seriously risk undoing the really good progress we have all made. Just today, the latest Public Health England statistics show that the UK has met its UN AIDS target of 90-90-90, ahead of 2020, which was the date. This amazing progress, with 92% of people living with HIV diagnosed, 98% of those on treatment, and 97% of those with undetectable viral load, meaning they can't pass it on. At the Terence Higgins Trust World AIDS Day reception earlier this week, I'm told the Minister hinted that the government was considering bolstering its ambition on HIV to committing to reaching 0 new HIV transmissions by 2030. So in light of today's statistics, now is the time to seize that opportunity of reaching 0 new HIV infections and be a true global leader. Can the Minister provide details of how the UK government actually plans to end HIV infections, and what timescale will the government commit to? At present, 1 young person every day is still diagnosed with HIV, and young people continue to suffer some of the worst sexual health outcomes. We cannot be complicit on this. Will the Minister agree to work with the Department of Education to ensure relationship and sex education guidance has a strong focus on not only HIV prevention, but anti-HIV stigma? And finally, will the Minister liaise with DFID colleagues to ensure funding is increased for research so that we are making the huge gains in scientific breakthroughs so we can eradicate this disease globally? Mr. Deputy Speaker, In 2 days' time, on World AIDS Day, I will stand with my community to mourn the losses of those who have died of AIDS. I will do that at the Brighton AIDS Memorial, the only such dedicated public memorial in the country. I will stand there in the knowledge that I will live a life so many couldn't. I am able to do that because of the people that have come before me, the people who have fought and lost their lives, and the people who stood up and had their lives changed. We owe it to these people to beat the disease, something we have the power to do. I hope future generations will look at HIV in the same way that we look at smallpox and polio, diseases that were once killers that can now be eradicated. Mr. Deputy Speaker, LGBT people often talk about coming out as something that you constantly have to do to new neighbours, friends and work colleagues. You can say the same about your HIV status. I've spent many nervous moments deciding whether to tell new friends and acquaintances about my status. The lump forms in your throat and your heart flutters, and you finally kind of blurt it out, and then hopefully you move on. Well, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'd like to thank you for giving me this platform to do just that. I'd like to thank my friends and family, my colleagues for supporting me, and thank you to the Terence Higgins Trust for all the work they do and the support they've given me in preparing for this today. We have the ability to end new HIV transmissions as well as end stigma and discrimination, not only here, but globally. And I hope we can all make that our mission. Thank you.
Can I just say, we shouldn't clap in the House, but I understand why people have. Can I just say, from the Chair, I think it's a very brave, a very moving speech, and has given hope to a lot of people around the world. And I would also say, I broke convention today by allowing the front bench to speak in the German debate. So this is not the norm, this is a one-off. Please be reassured of that. Stephen Doherty.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And as chair of your party group on HIV and AIDS, can I first start by offering a wholesome tribute to the bravery, the courage and the example of our honourable friend and colleague, not only for sharing with us his own experiences, his own very personal experiences in such a clear, honest and impactful way that won't, I think, just have an impact here in this country but much more globally, but also, and I wouldn't expect any less from him, not shying away from the fact that HIV is political. And that many of the issues that those living with HIV and that those experiencing stigma and discrimination and lack of access to services still face in this country and indeed globally today. And I think if there's any message that goes out from here today, it should be that that we need to continue to fight and we need to end this by 2030, and we can end it. And by the example that he has shown today, I am all the more confident that we will do so. So I try to pay my full tribute to him. And I want to pay tribute as well on behalf of our other vice chairs who I know wanted to be here today but couldn't, Baroness Barker and Lord Black, and also our colleague, the member for Stockton South, who I know incredibly proud of what the honourable gentleman has done today. And as he said, you know, this is something that has dramatically transformed since the world's first AIDS Day 30 years ago. I remember coming to these issues working in the international development sector for World Vision, Oxfam and others, and back then looking at some of the horrific statistics, particularly of young people orphaned, made vulnerable, and those living with HIV and those dying from AIDS. You just saw this as an unreachable mountain that couldn't be overcome. And I think the progress that's been made over the last 15 years is remarkable, but what we must not have is a slip back in that progress. I'll happily
Well, Member for Giving Way, and I'd just like to take this opportunity to express on my own behalf and for my SNP colleagues who can't be here our commendation for the incredibly powerful and moving testimony that the Member for Brighton Kemp Town has provided today. And I think the member speaking is absolutely correct that in fact that speech will be heard not just here, not just across this country, but around the world, and has that opportunity to tackle the stigma that is still associated in so many parts of the world, and that stigma that prevents people seeking the treatment that they need and even seeking the diagnosis that they need. Despite all the opportunities and all the funding that is provided, there has to be a change of mindset as well, and so we're thoroughly behind what we're hearing today.
I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his intervention and completely agree with what he's said. And as my Honourable Friend has said, access to antiretroviral treatment has revolutionised both treatment and prevention, and it's enabled many HIV-positive people to achieve viral suppression where the level of HIV in the blood is so low that it is undetectable and, crucially, and we've got to emphasise this, untransmissible to others. You equals you. That is one of the messages that must ring loud and clear from my Honourable Friend's speech today and from this House. And it has transformed the medical understanding of HIV from a fatal and emergency disease to one that is chronic, manageable, and where people can live long, happy, healthy lives. But we must recognise the challenges that exist, particularly internationally. Among the world's 36.9 million people living with HIV, that is still a huge figure. 1 in 4 remain unaware of their HIV status. And amongst those who have tested HIV positive, 21% globally do not have access to treatment. And of those who have access to antiretroviral treatment, 19% have not yet achieved viral suppression. I want to turn just briefly to some of the key challenges we face here in the UK that my Honourable Friend has laid out. 41% of people are still diagnosed late, and 1 in 8 people living with HIV do not know their status. In October, we actually held an event here where we heard from a lady who preferred not to use her real name, Mr Deputy Speaker, who had been diagnosed with HIV late in her 50s. And she had been left with lifelong physical complications and actually suffered tragically a mental health breakdown because of the extreme stress caused by the diagnosis and the lack of support, and because of that fear, that stigma, that discrimination she thought she would experience. And holding back tears, she told a room full of strangers that she had been unable to share her HIV status with her friends or family. And so the courageous example set by my old friend today, unfortunately there are still many people out there, including many I know, who would not feel that confidence to do this and would not feel the confidence even to share in private circumstances their status, and we have to turn that around and end that stigma and discrimination. I would absolutely endorse what my honourable friend has said about PrEP. It is simply extraordinary that we are still waiting for the English NHS to make this routinely available. I know I've been told of people this week who want to access PrEP and cannot access PrEP. That simply cannot be a right way forward from a pure public health point of view, from a rights point of view, from a cost point of view. In all respects, that is wrong, and I hope the Minister can give us some positive news on this, and that we're going to see progress that we've seen in the other nations. And I do want to pay tribute, as my honourable friend did, to our Welsh Labour Health Secretary in Wales, who has shown quite a lot of political leadership and practical leadership as Minister on this issue. And I was disappointed when we had the Department for Health's prevention strategy, which much in there for us all to agree with, just last month, that it failed to mention sexual health at all. Now, you know, that was a huge disappointment, because there was a huge amount in there which very much applies to the agenda we've been talking about today. And I hope the Minister can explain to us what the Department is going to do to ensure that sexual health and HIV prevention are at the heart of that prevention strategy for the NHS overall. And to emphasise as well what my honourable friend said about demand for sexual health services rising and the challenges facing particular communities, whether that is the BME community, whether that's the LGBT community, whether that's young people, whether that's sex workers, whether that's injecting drug users. Sometimes very, very unfashionable and difficult topics to talk about in this House and that people shy away from. We need to have honest and frank conversations if we're going to end HIV and end AIDS in this country. And globally, there are still 15 million people who are not accessing treatment because of inadequate health systems and funding, discriminatory laws, stigma, discrimination, often colonial-era laws that have been passed over that ensure that people don't get the treatment that they need. And the UK needs to lead the way in ending HIV stigma for good and supporting these programmes through the work of the Department for International Development. And I do want to pay tribute to the Minister's colleague in the Department for International Development, who did announce at the AIDS conference in Amsterdam an increase in funding for the Robert Carr Network Fund that so many of us have campaigned for, and to support civil society organisations and to support key populations. And it was an absolute inspiration actually yesterday to hear from not only a young female AIDS activist from Zimbabwe living with HIV called Audrey, but also two former presidents, the former president of Botswana, Festus Mogae, and the former president of Mozambique, Joaquim Chissano. And President Mogae spoke to us in a way I didn't expect. He spoke about all of the things we know that we need to do to tackle HIV, but he stood up as a former African leader and said, We need to address the needs of the LGBT population. We need to address the needs of the trans population. We need to address the needs of sex workers. We need to address the needs of injection drug users. That sends an incredibly strong signal to leaders across Africa and across the world that we must talk about these issues, we must take action on them, and I hope that the UK will continue to provide that crucial support. So with that, Mr Deputy Speaker, again I want to pay tribute to my friend for his courage, his bravery, the message that it sends. I hope the Minister will have some hopeful words for us in terms of the situation here in the UK. But I also want to end by just thanking all of the organisations who do so much to support our work as an APPG, whether that's Terence Higgins Trust, National AIDS Trust, the International Alliance, Stop AIDS, Youth Stop AIDS, BASH, so many more organisations, and so many of the organisations are active in our own communities. I'm sorry to say, are fulfilling the gaps that have been left with cuts to provision, but are out there making this case, supporting people living with HIV and taking us all down that road to ending this epidemic by 2030.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'd like to commend all the speeches, particularly from my honourable friend, the bravery of speaking out in this place, which will go around the country, I'm sure. As a graduate of the 1980s London club scene, I know I had a narrow escape from contracting HIV. I remember the stories in the early 80s coming from San Francisco about people dying from really minor ailments like flu, and they thought originally it was something to do with taking too much amyl nitrate or poppers. Eventually, obviously, the virus was identified, but too late for some. So quite a few of my friends became ill, and we had many funerals in the mid-80s. I remember the Lighthouse project opening just down the road from my house. Princess Diana, the Princess of Wales, came to open it, and she did a huge amount to disperse the stigma, and we'll never forget the photograph of her holding hands with an HIV/AIDS sufferer, and how that really made people rethink about how you contract AIDS and just pure compassion for people who are ill. I was careful. But before I had my children, I had an HIV test. The results took an agonising 2 weeks. I was fine. I know now that people diagnosed with HIV live long and healthy lives with their treatment currently available. But I hear anecdotally that because of this, some people aren't being sufficiently careful with their health. So 2 weeks ago, I took the test again as part of this campaign. I was asked to do it in our local hospital. It now takes 2 minutes. You get the result immediately. Nobody needs to risk contracting HIV. But if anybody does, Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, I recommend they spend those 2 minutes to save their lives and that of their loved ones.
Will the Honourable Lady give way?
Yes.
I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way. I just wanted to add my support to what she said. I too did this. I think they referred to the word pricking the finger. There was some probably quite naughty expression that was used by the Terence Higgins Trust when they suggested that I could show that it actually isn't that difficult, doesn't take that long, and there was counselling and support around it. So I recommend any honourable member that hasn't already taken the plunge and shown HIV/AIDS the finger, that they do so. And thank her for bringing that up.
Thank you. Thank you. And absolutely, I recommend everybody do it. It literally takes 2 minutes. I'd just like to finish, Madam Deputy Speaker. As regards ending stigma, my honourable friend here has made a very powerful statement. This is your Diana moment.
Oh. Minister Steve Brighton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It was an unexpected end, but what a lovely thing to say at the end. Anyway, my friend from Bristol, give HIV the finger, I believe is the expression. So, wow, Madam Deputy Speaker, I know you've just taken over the chair, but you have missed a treat. I would suggest that you watch back. So let me congratulate what it says here, the Honourable Member for Brighton Kemp Town for securing the debate, but obviously I share his passion for the topic, but I didn't know what he was going to say until we spoke literally just before the debate, and even then I didn't know how he was going to say it and the extent to which he was going to put so much personal into it. The turnout of his friends and his colleagues around him for the speech was testament to the power of his speech and how much they obviously think of him. Clapping is not right in the chamber, but even I did clap at his speech, and that's I don't like to clap in the chamber or in church, but I have done one of them. And the look on his face when his colleagues were all standing up clapping him was wonderful. If I'd thought, I would have stood up and took a photo for him, because it would be a nice moment for him. But I think no, she's now Madam Deputy Speaker is not at all happy with that. Too far. Edit that bit out, Hansard. It was an incredible speech. It was a very brave thing to do. And, you know, after a debate that had just been had, and we were here for the wind-up speeches, Madam Deputy Speaker, on education, which got a little political at times. Once again, the adjournment debate is Parliament's best-kept secret. It's where all the good things go on. And this was certainly a good thing. So as the Honourable Gentleman reminded us, you know, World AIDS Day is 30 years old this year. And we had a wonderful reception in Speaker's House on Tuesday night with the Terence Higgins Trust. Some really good friends there. Second time I've done that now. And as I said then, this week and Saturday will be about remembering loved ones who've lost their challenge, lost their battle to HIV. But it will be celebration, as he said. And I know he said that he will be at the Brighton AIDS Memorial on the weekend, and I wish him well with that, and to everybody who will be there with him from his constituency, and I'm sure much further afield. But it's also a chance, isn't it, to say, you know, how much has changed since the late 80s, and, you know, our health needs are different. You know,
Honourable friend, give way.
Yeah.
I just wanted to rise briefly to say how fortunate I feel I am to have been walking past the chamber, see this debate, take the opportunity to come in. My first wife was a nurse, and I remember when she came home from work, I think 27 years ago, having just treated her first AIDS case, and we were both scared. And since then, the way the treatment of it and the understanding and appreciation of it in society has changed so dramatically. I realise now, having heard the speech, there is still some way to go if you're hesitant about telling new friends and acquaintances, but it felt like a genuine privilege to have been here to hear you speaking, so thank you very much for that.
Thanks to my Honourable friend for that. So, you know, much has changed, of course, since the late 80s. I was saying that the health needs are different. We've got better drugs, we've got better diagnostic tools, and yeah, as has been said, you know, attitudes to HIV and AIDS are totally different. They're totally transformed. The lady from Kensington mentioned Princess Diana, as in the original one, as opposed to the new one, and that incredible moment. And I'll just repeat what I said the other night in Speaker's House. That, you know, I was in secondary school at that time, and that was an image that I remember powerfully, of that being broadcast, that image. And, you know, I was only a teenager at the time. Little did I know I'd be the Public Health Minister talking about these issues, but it was one of those images, wasn't it, that's really seared into our national conscience. And you know, what a great loss that lady is to so many social causes, and of course to our family. But it was an incredible image. And as the Honourable Gentleman says, today is not about dying of AIDS, but it's about living with HIV. But I go further, you know, it's more than that, isn't it? It's not really living with, it's just living. And I'm also very privileged to be the cancer minister, and the number of times that cancer patients say to me, and my shadow opposite knows this, is that, you know, when we ran the all-party breast cancer group together, how many times did people say to us, you know, I am not my cancer. It's something that I do, something that I have as well. And happily now, HIV is just part of the Honourable Gentleman. I'm sure he'd rather it wasn't, but it's something that he doesn't just live with, it's something that he lives. So in 1987, the government, there's a big public health display at the moment, Madam Deputy Speaker, in the foyer of the Department of Health, with all the different public health campaigns over the years. And you know, the terrifying tombstone image is obviously something that we rightly moved on from, but it is still an incredible part of our public health campaign history. And, you know, the government back then made a very bold move to run a major public information campaign on HIV. It was Don't Die of Ignorance, of course, where we piloted the needle exchange schemes and we introduced HIV testing, and, you know, we really raised the prospect, of course, with the public. And if we look at the HIV epidemic, Madam Deputy Speaker, in this country, I think we can be very proud of government's record over many, many years, and of course all parties. As figures released today show, as has been said, the UK has met the UNAIDS triple 90 target. Yes, it's one of the first countries in the world to do so. I think we are all across the House very proud of that. The latest report from Public Health England shows that in 2017 an estimated 92% of people living with HIV in the UK were diagnosed, 98% of those were on treatment, and 97% of those on treatment were unable to pass on their infection. This is a major achievement, and we should be proud of it, but more importantly than that, of course, the people who work in our health service and who have done so for years, like the partner of my honourable friend, should be even more proud of it. So let me touch on prevention. One of my passions and one of the Secretary of State's priorities. We don't yet have a cure for HIV. And that's why, of course, prevention is so important. Our efforts to prevent HIV and AIDS, of course, have been highly successful. Much has been mentioned about the international dimension, and I just want to touch on that if I can. So the UK is a world leader in efforts to end the AIDS epidemic, including through our major investment in the Global Fund. Our largest investments are through our multilateral organisations such as the Global Fund to fight AIDS, UNAIDS and UNITAID, given their greater reach and scale. And I met Lelio from UNITAID at the G20 in Argentina last month, and they're doing such good things with the investment that we announced in Amsterdam, that the honourable gentleman from Cardiff South and Penarth North mentioned in his remarks. And I work closely with my honourable friend in the Department for International Development and the Foreign Office, which sits across those departments. So with those three departments, we're very tight and we work very closely together on it. And there are excellent initiatives like the Men's Star Initiative, which of course aims to get more young men tested and onto life-saving HIV treatment to protect them and their partners. Then we've got, of course, the Elton John AIDS Foundation and other partners. Men's Star's rolling out a self-testing campaign in East Africa. So the UK is the second largest donor to UNITAID, a charity which does so much work against stigma, providing an annual contribution of around £60 million a year as part of our £60 million, as part of our 20-year funding commitment. Now, there's been lots of talk about domestic, of course, and I'll turn to that. So last year, NHS England launched the world's largest PrEP trial. It was something that I've been very honest at the dispatch box about. I had never heard of until I became the Public Health Minister. Why would you? But it didn't take me very long, once officials had explained to me the PrEP, that it sounded like a real no-brainer to me. And I know that many people are eagerly awaiting results of the trial. I am one of them. My officials know of my impatience, Madam Deputy Speaker, which is legendary in our department. It is crucial that we've got the right information to address the major questions, to effectively implement the PrEP on a larger scale. His savings point is very well made. It's not lost on me. I'm not in a position to make him a policy promise at the dispatch box today, but on the places point that he mentioned and that the honourable gentleman from Cardiff and Penarth mentioned, all I can say is that I'm listening very, very closely to what they said, and they should continue those discussions with me, and I know they will. The all-party group, who we have met, of course, in DH to discuss these issues with, should continue those discussions with me. We're listening. So many of the public health challenges, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we face today require very different approaches and I think fresh thinking if we're going to make progress. Indeed, in the last few years, there have been many innovative new ways to tackle HIV have emerged, including the HIV testing options, the self-sampling and the home testing services, which I know are very popular. I just want to talk about the HIV Innovation Fund, if I may, which is something that I'm very proud of. We know that innovation and community-led interventions have had a pretty significant role to play, actually, in limiting the HIV epidemic in England. And that's why we set up the HIV Prevention Innovation Fund in 2015 to support voluntary sector organisations. The fund has supported many projects since it started. I announced those at an event here in the House last year, which I know the gentleman who chairs the all-party group was present at. In 2017, we awarded just under £600,000 to 12 projects. I'm very pleased to say we're running the fund again this year, and the principle of the fund is something that we're carrying over into other areas of policy because it has been so successful, and I want to see more. I want to see us doing more of that. So this year, of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, we celebrated the 70th birthday of the NHS, and I've already mentioned the incredible staff that work across the service. And, England has an outstanding record of achievements in HIV treatment and care, and I want to take the opportunity to recognise and thank everyone doing that, as I've already done. But care for people, of course, with HIV is now highly effective, and increasing numbers of people are living with HIV into old age, normal life expectancy. AV therapy, antiviral therapy, Madam Deputy Speaker, it's transformed the outlook for people living with HIV from what used to be a tragic death sentence to a very manageable long-term condition, which we've heard about so incredibly this afternoon. So our policy, Madam Deputy Speaker, is to make sure that HIV testing is as accessible as possible, in particular to those at increased risk. It's therefore very important that testing is available in a range of clinical settings and community settings, hence why the Innovation Fund and their programmes are important. Over the years, local authorities, which of course are now public health authorities up and down the land, have introduced innovations and improvements of their own, in particular around testing. So we know it's working. And testing activity at sexual health services, which we know are under great pressure, and we don't deny that for one moment, they continue to increase. HIV diagnoses have fallen. HIV testing in sexual health services has increased 15% from 1.07 million tests in 2013 to 1.24 million last year in 2017. Now, most significantly, we have seen a drop of 28% in new HIV diagnoses between 2015 and 2017 last year. This is encouraging, this is good, but we must not, and I can assure the House that we are not complacent and continue to maintain this progress. Now, the gentleman from Cardiff and South and Penarth North mentioned the prevention strategy, and that was a very top-line document. I had a meeting this afternoon, actually, talking about the Prevention Green Paper, which will follow next year, and I can assure the honourable gentleman that the long-term plan, which will follow before that, will absolutely have sexual health in it and HIV in it, and I'm being very ambitious with officials in that, and I know that he will hold us rightly to account on that, so thank him for giving me a chance to say that. I want to touch on education and awareness, Madam Deputy Speaker. So education around HIV and how it's transmitted remains absolutely critical, and the honourable gentleman said that in his opening remarks. So I'm very pleased that schools will teach the relationship and sex education from September 2020, which the government announced relatively recently. It's something I've been very involved in around the cancer brief, because I'm very keen that schools responsibly teach cancer awareness to young people as well. So at secondary schools, there will be clear and accurate teaching about sexual matters, including factual knowledge around sex, sexual health, including HIV and sexuality. And the schools minister was sitting next to me throughout his speech, and I know has to be somewhere else, but wanted me to pass on his congratulations to the honourable gentleman for his speech. So, testing is, of course, the only way to be certain of your status. And last week was National HIV Testing Week, and the Secretary of State took part. And this flagship campaign promotes regular testing among the most at-risk population groups. It aims to reduce the rates of late diagnosis or those remaining undiagnosed. So, stigma. So, sadly, stigma is a significant factor as to why people don't test for HIV. I understand that, and this can mean that, of course, the HIV then goes untreated, and of course then it can be transmitted. So it's vital that we continue to break down the stigma and normalise testing and support those who are most at risk of infection. And the Can't Pass It On campaign, which again is another, whoever's doing the marketing for THT, they're doing a very good job. I know they work with a very good agency, but I said this at the reception the other night. I was on the tube the other day with my daughter, who spotted some advertising branding around testing week, and she asked me what it was because it caught her eye, and I was able to explain to her. She's only 11. I was able to explain to her, and I think that if more parents did that to their children and to their relatives, I think that would help break down that stigma. And Terence Higgins Trust have a very good part of their website on the Can't Pass It On campaign, and they have different people's stories. And I have a funny feeling that before we leave the chamber, Russell's story will be on that page with the clip from today in Parliament, and I will certainly be clipping that off the Parliament Live website myself and tweeting out through the DH social media this afternoon, Madam Deputy Speaker. So let me just take the opportunity once again to to congratulate the Honourable Member for introducing what is a very timely and vital debate. I wish him and everybody well for Saturday, who will be marking World AIDS Day, who will be remembering, who will be celebrating, wherever they are, privately, and not yet feeling able to do so publicly, and those who are, like the Honourable Gentleman, able to do so publicly. They're all part of the story, and our best wishes and love go to them all. So we look forward ahead, I think, to brighter futures in this area of policy, as we work towards what I am determined will be zero stigma and zero transmissions. Thank you.
Thank you. Wouldn't it be wonderful if more people paid attention to the work that's done in this House in debates like this excellent, positive, meaningful, emotive and successful debate this afternoon? If